Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. This article, I think, supports my theory that I expressed on a few occasions regarding the HIMARS. And the HIMARS being the US missile defense systems that they provided to Ukraine, about 20 or so, and before they got to the 20 of them, they already reversed the whole dynamic of the war, which they started winning. The Ukrainians started winning when the Americans delivered the first 4 of them. By the way, the Russians were incapable since, I don't know, April or so, when it was the first delivered. They're incapable of hitting one. They did not destroy any. They're so evasive and invisible that, pop, pop, they can't be hit. So, and I was like, oh my God, really? With 4 and then 8, 12, 18 or something, they are able to withstand the Russians' attacks and turn the whole thing around, and it's unbelievable. I want some HIMARS. Obviously, that was the whole goal of the sales session. But then I found out that Poland, its neighbor, made an order for HIMARS from United States of 500 of them. And I was saying, whoa, wait a second. I was thinking, I said, these guys are capable of beating the Russians, the mighty Russians, the big Russians, with not even 20 HIMARS. So that's we were told. But the Poles are ordering 500? What are they going to fight? The galaxy? What the hell are they going to fight? You know what I mean? I mean, if these guys with 20 kick Russia's ass, why do you need 500? They're going to fight who? Who are you going to fight? So that raised the question. Then the Poles ordered 300 the same kind of defense systems from South Korea, like whatever. I was like, what the hell? 800 defense systems, and Ukraine beats Russia with less than 20? That nobody can, you know what I mean? I was like, something is wrong here. And what I thought it was, maybe they're not as good, but they are good. Or, I mean, they must be good since they tell us this. I thought maybe the Ukrainians had, before the war, had about 100 on their territory before it started. And they just activated them like, oh, we just got 4. And actually they activated 104. Otherwise, the other guys would not have ordered 500. And now I have here a kind of a, I don't want to say proof, but it helps my case, stating that in those 8 years, from 2014 until 2022, the Ukrainians bought time, and they were helped and financed and trained by NATO, United States and Great Britain and others. That's why when Russia got in, they didn't fight Ukraine. They fought a well-prepared army. And these guys give some information that I'm like, really more than I expected. It's going to be a kind of a long article, but I will try to skim through it. But I don't know, because it's like everything what this guy is saying is like, oh. And he was pranked in saying these things. This article comes from Sputnik, and it's from Thursday, actually. And this is the title. Kiev joined Minsk peace process only to build up army with NATO's help. Poroshenko tells pranksters. So Poroshenko was the president of Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. So Kiev joined Minsk peace agreements process only to build up army with NATO's help. That's what this guy says. And now let's see the extent of that help. The former Ukrainian president is directly responsible for the over 8 years old conflict in Donbass, backtracking on his election pledge to stem growing violence in the country's east in the spring of 2014, and instead ramping up the war. The Minsk peace accords were just a ploy for time designated to give Ukraine's army a breather and allow it to be built up with NATO assistance following a series of defeats against the Donbas militias, former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko has revealed. And I'm quoting, "I needed these Minsk Accords to get at least 4 years to form the Ukrainian armed forces, build up the Ukrainian economy, and train the Ukrainian military together with NATO to create the best armed forces in Eastern Europe, created according to NATO standards, end quote, Poroshenko told infamous Russian pranksters Vladimir Vovan Kuznetsov and Alexei Lexus Stolyarov. Poroshenko told the pranksters who posed as former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, that Kiev doesn't have the resources to win the present conflict against Russia, and suggested that the key to victory lies in Washington and not Kiev. And I'm quoting, "Putin feels like a macho right now, and he still has significant resources to achieve victory. Our successes on the battlefield are not enough. This is enough to save Ukraine. This is enough to save Ukraine, but this is not enough to weaken Putin," Poroshenko said, urging the US to ramp up the weapons aid and think up new ways to sanction Moscow. "Russia has," and I'm quoting, 10 times more artillery, 30 times more ammunition, and significant superiority in the air," according to the former president. And I'm quoting again, "We need to do everything in our power to supply Ukraine with air defense systems, F-16 and A-10 aircraft, in order to at least balance the offensive potential of Russia. Now we have nothing to protect our troops from air strikes," he said. Oops. Poroshenko praised US military assistance to Kiev, particularly the Western caliber US artillery HIMARS, radio electronic warfare systems, and counter-battery radar, suggesting, and I'm quoting, "Not everyone understands that all this success, of course, would have been impossible without the role, support, and aid of the US," end quote. Poroshenko also singled out the UK-delivered Spartan armored personnel carriers and MLRS shield vehicles from Italy as weapon systems which have proven critical. Poroshenko, who made a name for himself after February by doing photo ops riding around in the streets of Kiev in a truck dubbed Bandera Mobile, a reference to Ukrainian World War II Nazi collaborator Stepan Bandera, said he expects the crisis to continue until the end of spring of 2023, and the situation depends much less on Ukraine and Ukrainians as much more on the wisdom of the American people. Wisdom like we wake up and say, "Hey, wait a minute." And I was quoting that. The politician, who is also one of Ukraine's richest men, well, a coincidence. I think Zelensky now is the richest man, and Shmihal and Reznikov and those guys by far. How much money they got pumped from the United States, I think now they're the richest. Expressed confidence in continued bipartisan support for the conflict from Washington, dismissing threats by the Trump Republican to limit or halt it. I would say the same thing, because it's the guys behind all those guys that actually dictate what the politicians do and say, not the other way around. Poroshenko also revealed that in January of 2022 he sent President Zelensky a letter calling for measures to prepare a defense of Ukraine from Russia's Crimea to the Belarusian border, increase defense spending, conscript 60,000 Ukrainians, and create a special military reserve. Poroshenko said he did not get a response. The politician also pointed to fissures, I think you call it, the cracks inside Ukraine's domestic political elite, and accused, quote-unquote, useful idiots in charge of undermining unity in the country by attacking democratic institutions, quote-unquote, and politicizing the rule of law. Poroshenko accused, in quotation mark, useful idiots in the presidential administration of stripping him of the ability to leave the country to attend the NATO Parliamentary Assembly earlier this year. Poroshenko was Ukraine's president from 2014 to 2019. and came to power in an unconstitutional snap election boycotted by pro-Russian parties after the February 2014 Euromaidan coup, which ousted the country's democratically elected government and president. After leaving power, Poroshenko was slapped with over a dozen criminal charges, including tax evasion, abuse of office, and high treason for the signing of the Minsk agreements. Like Poroshenko before him in 2014, Zelensky came to power in 2019 on the back of promises to the electorate that he would end the conflict in Donbas. Instead, he gave up on the idea in 2019 after thousands of ultra-nationalist fighters and pro-Euro political forces, including Poroshenko's allies, took to the streets of Kiev and threatened to overthrow him. Donbas was subsequently turned into a frozen conflict. The Minsk Accords were declared dead in early 2022 in the wake of shelling, sabotage and sniper attacks against Donbas. Moscow launched a special military operation in Ukraine to preempt So, I think it's very revealing what this guy says. I expected him to say more about how much help in terms of numbers of HIMARS and other or anything that they got from the Americans, but he did not say anything. I knew everything that he said over there. I could add to that a lot, but I knew that he was a corrupt person. He did not serve anything. He was allowed to leave the country because he played his role for the masters. So Zelensky cannot do anything because he's on the same team. You know what I mean? So he's not going to say, well, Poroshenko needs to do this, do this. No, because if he's going to need to do that, then Zelensky needs to do that too, because he did probably more BS than this guy. Anyway, remember when they did those unconstitutional elections in 2014 after they overthrew the democratic elected government in Kiev, those guys who overthrew that government are called traitors because they conspired with outside forces and states and departments and services to overthrow a democratically elected government, which you can't do that. That means you're a traitor. So when you do that and then those guys said, no, you know what, we're not going to participate, we don't recognize you guys, that guy needs to come back and then we do the elections and say, no, this is a new rule here, we're going to organize the elections. And that's why they are considered illegitimate, including Zelensky, because not all Ukrainians voted for these guys. They said, so he's voted only for people who recognize the whole coup d'etat in 2014, which, as I said, was a by any kind of definition you want, it was a treasonous act, not like here. It was, boom, 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 bam, bam, bam. People with arms, weapons, military, police, and so on. Not, anyway, I can't say too much. Anyway, so this is Poroshenko, and he's a tard. How can you say these kind of things in front of some pranksters? But anyway, probably he thinks that everything that he says is not something that's confidential or, it's top secret. So why not? I mean, I knew that. I don't know what's the big deal. It's just that he confirms that. That's the only thing. Confirms things that other people said. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.